Hello, everybody. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk with you about Vedic astrology, essentially what the planets are doing in the sky right now, and also to discuss uh, how it can affect you personally, how it can affect the society overall, and the world stage in general. So I'm going to start off. It's a little bit of a sleepy day for me, if you know what I mean. So I'm not a little, I don't think I'm as sharp as I usually am, if that's overstating the case. But I'm going to be professional. I'm going to do the best job I possibly can for you. Okay. If you would like a reading from me or would like to take lessons from me for in Vedic astrology in particular, I've had 33, three, essentially nearly 34 years experience in Vedic astrology. I'm continually adding to my knowledge base because it's a huge area of study. And so please contact me, if you will, at 508-525-0001. Again, that's 508-525-0001. You can text me at that number, or else you can send an email to Gary Gomes, excuse me, GaryGomesG at gmail.com. Okay, so it's Gary Gomes, my name, the letter G at gmail.com. All right. So let's see what's been going on astrologically. So it's been an interesting week. Um, and it seems astrologically, and I hate to start off with this, but it seems astrologically that um, there has been some movement uh, in Trump's direction. Um, but again, like I said, there's a weakness in the chart, in his chart that takes off. So I'm just going to do like a quick overview of the two charts just for to get that out of the way. Let's see now. Hold on a second. Because somebody congratulated me last week on essentially analyzing it correctly, and my response was, "It's still a few weeks away, lest you know, I don't want to take bows before the curtain is down. Let's put it that way." And because again, there's a flaw in astrologers as well as in other people, and that is you can get too attached to your predictions or to your prognostications, and there may be something that's like staring at you right in the face, uh, and you're missing it. You're just absolutely missing it. So that doesn't mean I'm a bad astrologer, uh, but I think um, the bane of any occupation or any person who's in this particular field is overconfidence or carelessness and looking for reaffirmation. We tend to view the world. I was watching a few videos earlier today about philosophy and essentially the philosophical evolution of the West. If you go back to, so this is like from Kant up through contemporary philosophers, and actually starting back uh, as early as Thales in Greece. And it's interesting because if you look at um, Indian philosophy, and I'm no expert in the field by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of concepts in Indian astrology which parallel um, late 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century uh, philosophy show up around anywhere from like around uh, 1000 BCE to around 1500 AD in Indian astrology or in Indian philosophy and beyond. And I'm sure that's true of many other systems. I'm just a little bit familiar with Indian philosophy. So it isn't like these ideas are the exclusive domain of one culture. The culture hits a point in which um, a lot of these various thought patterns come together and they just say, well, okay, this is how I understand the universe. Um, and so, but we're always looking at what it reminded me of was we're always looking at the world through our understanding of it, through our filter. And at least uh, one philosophy or several philosophies view the world as an illusion or an imperfect place, or or that. Um, so I don't want to get too off into this tangent. Precise. Let me just say that we all view the world through our own filters, through our own perspectives. So, and I don't think anybody's really immune from that, unless they've developed a great deal of detachment and a great deal of perspective. It's really tough to pull yourself out of your own training and your own inclinations. So, we're just going to go quickly to Donald Trump's chart, just very, very quickly. And there was something that came up earlier this week, and that is he is getting tired. So um, that was criticized by the other campaign. But if we're honest, uh, Trump has made over twice the public appearances that Harris has made in the since the convention, since their respective conventions. So now that's a little bit misleading because the Democratic convention was held a bit after the Republican convention. But even if we adjust for that time scale, it's he's been on a pretty um, aggressive trajectory. Okay, so this is Donald Trump Jr.'s chart. This is not what I want. I want Donald Trump. Okay, hold on a second. Oh, sorry, folks. Okay, so let's go here for a second. There's Donald Trump. Okay, so that looks right. Okay. All right. So, um, yeah, so as of October 1st, Mr. Trump entered a Venus subperiod. Now, Venus in his chart is in the 12th house, which is not really considered to be a good place. Well, it's one of the better placements for Venus, let's put it that way. But it's not considered to be good. And also, Saturn is by transit. Saturn is aspecting Venus, which you'll see in a few seconds when I go back to the actual chart. So the Mahadasha, or the major planetary period, which is what this is over here, this is figured from where the person's moon sign is at birth. Um, that major planetary period will give signs of planets aspecting it. So, at least from this chart, the Venus subperiod will be susceptible to a bit of slowing down. Um, the other thing is, so if we go to Harris's chart, so let's go to Kamala Harris's chart for just one second. But I just want to say something about this Venus. As I've said in previous um, presentations, um, Venus is in Trump's 12th house. That's not necessarily a bad placement, especially for public service. And it's also in the 11th house from the Lord of the major planetary period, which can give victories. Okay, so I think this is kind of interesting because we get to look at the placement. So 12th house is a house of loss, but 11th house is a house of victories. So I just find it fascinating the way these periods actually work. Um, and let's go over here. So let's go to Kamala Harris. And as I've said many times before, Trump does have the advantage of Jupiter passing over his 10th house, which is not the best Jupiter transit, but which is actually quite good for success. Okay, so let me just go over here to Miss Harris's chart. All right, so this is Kamala Harris's chart, October 20th. Oh, she had a birthday today. It's her birthday. Okay, so happy birthday, Vice President Harris. And she's in a Rahu major planetary period. Rahu really doesn't. Let me just see now what this does. So somebody was saying that her placement shows up in a lot of divisional charts as being in the same sign. It shows up in the D10. It doesn't show up in the D9, D4, D3. So Rahu is a powerful dynamic in her chart. But again, I think something that is often overlooked when we look at these auspicious combinations is it's quite something to be named the Vice President of the United States. That's a very high level of prestige, so it isn't like, she just faded into obscurity during her Rahu major planetary period. Now, Venus is placed in the third house, and it's the Lord of the fifth house. So that can give gain through politics. Okay, fifth house Lord is in the third house. But one of the problems I'm seeing with her chart is that the more aggressive side of her chart will show up. It coincided roughly when Mars entered Cancer. So that's what that particular combination does. It can overcompensate or be aggressive. And it's been my experience. So this is a Parivartana yoga, that is the lords of this house, the 11th house, and the second house exchange. So what that means, basically Mars is in the moon sign and the moon is in Mars sign. She's in a moon subperiod. All right, so the Venus is going to give her that ascendancy to power. The moon, however, although the moon is well placed in the Navamsha chart, is in the eighth house. So that's not a good placement. So again, like I said, they both have these placements that look superficially good, but are compromised, okay, because of house placement or some other condition. And I'm looking at the D10. Let's see where the moon is in her D10. D10 is in the 12th house. So again, It's a similar combination to what Trump is encountering. But the other thing that concerns me is that Saturn's aspecting the moon, so that'll make her popular. That's definitely what it'll do. But Saturn's also aspecting Trump's moon. Um, I think so. Again, on that point, they're evenly matched. One thing I have noticed though about yogas that cancel out debilitation is that the planet that alters the debilitation helps out the debilitated planet, but the debilitated planet doesn't help out the other planet. So the moon will help out Mars. Okay, so she's has a rich husband, her family life, um, she's prosperity, she's had a lot of success. She's been an AG and a district attorney and a senator, so she's had uh, high-ranking jobs. But I think that on the downside, I've never seen a debilitated planet help out um, the planet that cancels debilitation. It tends to work the opposite way. So again, this is still pretty much a toss-up, like I said. Last week, I came out for Trump as the victor. But I just think if we're looking at the United States map just for 1 second, I'm just going to do this for 1 second. And this is a very simple analysis. Obviously, you're going to have to go into, I believe there are more things in this chart, US chart. Yes, quickly. Sorry, folks. And this is the chart I trust. So we're in a Moon Rahu period, but we're in a Moon Jupiter period and then Saturn period when the election comes up. So the actual day of the election is a Saturn sub period. Venus is in the same sign as Saturn in Trump's chart. Saturn's in Kamala Harris's ninth house in this chart. So again, like I said, I think they're sort of evenly matched. I just give the edge to Trump mainly because of the Jupiter transit. That's how I'm viewing it. Now, again, I'm not trying to make excuses for myself. Uh, Essentially, I could be wrong. I could be very, very wrong. But it's the main thing I'm looking at is K2's transiting Saturn right now in the US chart. Rahu's in the fourth. That K2 Saturn conjunction tends to favor a repeat. It tends to favor something coming back. So now again, is this empirically proven? No, not really. But that's just been my experience with K2. And it's in Trump's second house, the Mahadasha Lord house. Trump's Jupiter is wildly powerful in the chart. It's a stationary direct Jupiter. It's very, very powerful. Miss Harris's, Vice President Harris's chart, the rising sign is with all these planets connected with the seventh house of enemies and opposition. So I'm I'm just wondering if and Saturn's over the moon in Vedic astrology. So that may give it can be interpreted one of two ways. It may give increased interest in keeping things as they are, but it may also give increased interest in changing things around because Saturn's involved in a retrograde Saturn and a retrograde Jupiter. Those usually indicate looking back to the past and correcting for past mistakes. The one thing that I found fascinating is that we have this very, um, and again, Jupiter, I think one of the things that we overlook with Rahu is has to be tied um, extremely strongly uh, to a planet that gives eminence for it to Rahu and Ketu both have to be connected with that. And it's connected in Trump's chart, but it's not connected in Harris's chart, at least as far as I can tell. So that's what I'm basing it on. And again, I'm aware that I may be misinterpreting these. I'm aware that so I'm not saying that to for you to lose confidence in me. But again, I think this has been a really, really topsy-turvy year, right? So let's go to the actual astrology chart. So this in the US's chart. So Mercury favors Harris, but it also favors Trump because Trump has the 11th Lord, or the Lord of the 11th house in the 11th house in this particular time span. Um, Kamala has Mercury in, I believe I think she has an exalted Mercury, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check that. But Mercury's kind of a fickle planet. It changes so much. Let me just, no, she has Mercury in the fifth house of politics. So that's how it favors her. But again, like I said, you can make multiple arguments on both sides. It's not at all clear cut to me. Okay. So as I say, given the circumstances, and um, so I mean, this is from experience with several presidential campaigns that I'm giving this warning because something can look obvious to an astrologer, and then all of a sudden it'll flip, especially with K2 in the 10th house in the US chart. Um, and I think that's what we should all be worried about. The K2 in the 10th house will lead to some, I think, no matter who wins, some domestic violence and some disruption, especially because Mars will be debilitated while this is happening. The patterns, so let's look at the actual chart right now. And again, keep in mind Harris's chart is lining up with Mars and Mercury and being in the same position in her birth chart as they are in her birth chart. So I think this is fascinating. But Venus beats all of the other planets in terms of strength, in terms of natural strength. So I think that, that basically, as I said, the advantage goes to Trump. Let's see now. Hold on a second. So let's go to the now chart. We're in New Bedford. And let's look at the overall world and how it's working. And so as you can see right now, Venus is in Scorpio, as I told you before. is being aspected by Saturn. Uh, right now, Jupiter is the Lord of the first house, is in the sixth. The moon is exalted right now, so this is a good day to plan things or do things or maybe even buy things. This is a good day for that. It's not considered good for travel. It's good for creation, though. Saturn is in the third house, and that makes people very strong-willed, very determined to win no matter what. Rahu's in the fourth house. There's in general, just a lot of domestic discontent right now. Um, and again, this is shifting alliances. A lot of, I would call it chaos is too strong a word, but confusion with Rahu in the fourth house in Pisces. Um, Moon and Jupiter are in the same sign. That's usually a good placement uh, for popularity. So that particular combination is helpful to anybody that has planets or has a rising sign of Taurus. Mars is in Cancer in the eighth house. So again, it looks like there's generally a fear or a timidity or a risk aversion if Mars is in that sign. It can also cause overaggression. One of the neat things about Mars in Vedic astrology is it's considered the commander in chief of the planetary army. So it's normally connected to strategy and logic. Some astrologers connect it to lies. I don't. Basically, it has to do with self-determination or willingness to explore things on your own. Okay. But if Mars is in Cancer, it's a bit weak. It's a bit, um, it's going to work more from emotion more than strategy. And Mars is aspecting Mercury and the Sun, so that heat we felt over the past month won't go away. It's just that the government will feel like overcompensating to um, make its point known. So the sun stands for the government. That's why. So let me preface that. So that's why we're seeing some of these court cases coming up again and getting a second life. That's why we're seeing multiple media attacks on both candidates. The Mars Mercury aspect is very strong for that. And again, uh, an abundance of lying. And I hate to keep saying that this year, but that's been the pattern this year. So um, both candidates have been misrepresented or misrepresented themselves. Okay, this is not rocket science. And with K2 in the 10th, some people are still going to be uncertain about what direction they're they're going to move in. Okay. So, but they do know they want to gain. People, the public in general knows that it wants to gain. They want to weaken government because the sun's weaken the sign while the government's trying to overcompensate. And Venus in the 12th, again, most people want to save some money. Most individuals want to save some money. So overall, the combination, and let's look at the um, at what the planets in the actual signs mean just for a second. So Saturn essentially over here in this sign will give a lot of tornadoes, hurricanes. Rahu will give water disasters. Venus and Scorpio will give more water disasters or more losses. Moon and Jupiter and Taurus will give an eagerness for tradition, for um, financial growth. Mars is in the eighth house. Again, this is more water issues, more more emotional issues, but also more water-related issues. And K2s in the 10th, some potential for some earthquakes or volcanoes, but not as strong as before. And we have Sun and Mercury in the 11th house. That gives people lower levels of confidence, more attention on financial growth. Sun and Mercury are sufficiently far apart. Uh, and there's a phenomenon in Vedic astrology called combustion. Um, 13 degrees really is an intense combustion for Mercury. So Mercury is able to separate itself a bit from the sun. And Venus in the 12th house, a lot of worry about financial security. Um, I don't know if you saw on the news, but there have been more layoffs at various chains. Again, we're not showing negative economic growth, which is supposed to be one of the signs of a recession. But the layoffs, the number of layoffs are concerning. And I think overall, and again, anecdotally, I've had a lot of clients, especially in computer fields, come to me and say they can't get work. And these are skilled individuals. These aren't novices. So I think there's I mean, I'm not trying to panic anybody, but there is a real um, issue concerning um, economic growth. Okay, so that's, so again, this has been discussed for a while, and a lot of the predictions of doom and gloom were premature. But I think really over the fall, a lot of this stuff's going to hit pretty intensely and hit even more intensely in between January and May of next year. So so you have this um, overall pattern of Mars increasing violence, increasing the potential for violence, and and also the sun, which would increase the potential for violence from the government or from elected officials. Hopefully not. So it's interesting because the chart itself has, this is a relatively innocuous chart. Uh, and the moon and Venus and Jupiter are in mutual aspect. That's normally considered to be a good thing. It's not considered to be negative. But again, it can make us a little bit overly optimistic and a little bit out of touch with reality, especially since Jupiter's retrograde. Saturn's retrograde, and again, this will give some what I would call technological backtracking or um, or living in the past. As we go over the next 2 weeks, Mercury will enter Scorpio, and that'll be just in time for the election in the United States. But I think one of the things we're looking at is certain countries like China are very strongly affected by Virgo in the chart. The European Union and a lot of the countries in Europe have rising signs in Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo. Not everyone, but a lot of them do. And those countries will be under increased pressure over the next few years, both domestically and economically. So, and a lot of that won't go away really until the summertime. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. The United States is a Sagittarius rising country, and at least from the system that I use, and um, is going to have some issues with its allies and its enemies over the next um, 6 or 7 months. As far as a peace accord in either Ukraine or the Middle East is concerned, that's about 2.5 months before it's likely. Okay, so um, so I hope I'm wrong about that. By the way, uh, I'm not really a fan of what's going on out there. I don't think anybody is, and six wars going on right now, so that's not a good sign. And hopefully people will cool off a little bit. But I think in the fall isn't the time that we're excuse me, that we're going to see it happen. Excuse me. So at least from the chart, tough, not impossible. But let's look at the individual signs now, shall we? Okay, so for Aries, I'm just going to do more of a scope chart than an individual house by house chart. Uh, Good potential for money, some worry about the future and security, and some disagreements with relationship partners, a lot of hard work and expense for that particular sign this week. For Taurus, you have the Moon Jupiter conjunction in the first house, good for gains, good for financial effort. Um, Not a lot of bravery, though, not a lot of risk taking, and some difficulty with partners from this combination. K2 is down here, K2 in the fifth, and the Lord of the fifth and the sixth. So children will seem to have a lot more problems than normal. Venus is very well placed in the seventh house, so that can give either new relationship opportunities or opportunities to cheat, to be honest with you. And the rest of the chart looks like it's devoted to hard work and success. So that's good for Taurus. For Gemini, Gemini or Matuna has Mars affliction in the second house, so a lot of potential for fights with relationship partners or lovers, and also some concern over children shows up again for this particular sign. And the other thing is K2 in the fourth house and Saturn and Rahu in the ninth and 10th houses. Good for ascendancy for this chart, but not without a lot of hard work and a lot of compromise. So again, it's not a bad, and I don't want to neglect Venus in the fifth house, Lord being the sixth house. So it indicates temporary illnesses to children. For Cancer, so that was Gemini I just did. For Cancer, um, so again, a lot of focus on children, some domestic disputes. This is for Gemini again. I'm sorry. A lot of hard work, a lot of success, but again, some potential for losses, especially with Jupiter in the 12th house. For Cancer, Cancer has Mars in the first house, so emotionally that will make it easier to get into arguments with people. Mercury's in the fourth house. That's not a particularly bad placement. Uh, it'll put a lot of focus on home life, and this sign will have a lot of courage this month, but they'll have to watch their temper. And Venus is in the fifth house, very good for children, but a little bit difficult because Saturn's aspecting that Venus. Seventh house, no planets are in the seventh house. Lord of the seventh is in the 11th, so we have potential gains for a relationship partner. Also, this particular sign will benefit from those gains. And Saturn is in the eighth house, so again, a change or a readjustment of life patterns. That's been typical for this sign for the past year and a half. And finally, Rahu in the ninth, a lot of um, discussion with medical professionals or healthcare professionals, but not a lot of results, just kind of some frustration there. For Leo, Leo has um, the Lord of the First in the third house, so that will deplete the energy of this particular sign. Saturn aspecting the sign doesn't help things either. Uh, and let me see now, Mercury's Lord of the second and the 11th, so it gives financial gains to the sign. But again, a lot of expenses. For Venus, Venus is in the fourth house. So again, some increase in status, but again, slow acknowledgement because Saturn's involved with Venus. Let's see now. Rahu's in the eighth. Some conspiracies are being plotted against this sign or being determined against this sign. Not really anything to be super worried about, unless you're running for a high political position. Moon and Jupiter are in the ninth house. That's a great I'm sorry, in the 10th house. That's a great conjunction for success in work. And Mars is in the 12th house, so that can indicate increased fits of temper for the sign. For Virgo, Virgo has K2 in the first house, increased intuition, increased psychic ability for the sign. Mercury and Sun are in the second house. Good for finances, but there's also the possibility you could owe the government some money or have some difficulty with that. Venus is in the third house. Not necessarily a bad placement, although the sign will probably be too polite for its own good. Saturn is in the sixth house. That's actually a good placement because it encourages the particular person to work harder and to progress more. And let me see now. Okay, Rahu's in the seventh house, some difficulty with relationship partners seeming a little bit unstable or a little bit unreliable. The Moon Jupiter conjunction in the ninth house, so it's very positive, so because it does indicate increased luck. Mars is in the 11th house, a lot of bills to pay, but basically the money will come, but you'll have to be forced out from various sources. For Libra, Libra has the Sun in the first house, Mercury in the first house. So the sign is very smart, but it'll feel like it's under a lot of pressure to perform quickly. Venus is in the second house. That's a good placement for money and a good placement for financial growth. Saturn is aspecting, that takes away some of the splendor of it, some of the good attributes of it, but it's still a good combination for money. But it does mean money through hard work. Saturn's in the fifth house. A lot of people with this placement will tend to, so this would be for Libras, Libra risings, or Libra moons. A lot of people with this placement will be having to make up for past work or past areas they've neglected. And let's see now. Finally, we get to Moon and Jupiter in the eighth, so this sign will seem very attractive to people. It will attract a lot of attention. And Mars is in the 10th house, so there will be some frustration or anxiety about work life. K2 in the 12th is not necessarily bad, it's just sort of dangling there, and it gives an interest in liberation or running away from it all. For Scorpio, Scorpio has Venus in the first house. It is, by the way, good for Libra for gain because Lord of the 11th is in the first house, but sometimes the sign can sabotage itself by undervaluing itself. So that's something that Libras should watch out for. This is October 15th through November 15th, not the traditional Libra. For Scorpio, Venus is in Scorpio, so this will increase sexual energy in the chart. The Saturn aspect does tend to make people a little bit more cautious about getting involved in relationships, obviously. And Jupiter in is Lord of the second in the seventh house will give increased gains from wife or relationship partner. Uh, we have Saturn in the fourth house, so there'll be a lot of bills connected with home, a lot of financial obligations to fulfill at home. Kids will seem a little bit ungrateful or difficult to work with. The Moon Jupiter combination is in the sixth house. Um, I'm sorry, is in the seventh house. That's good for financial growth, but I think Mars in the ninth house, uh, the person with this particular sun or moon sign could place blocks or obstacles in terms of attaining luck or attaining contact with highly influential people. So that doesn't mean it can't succeed. It'll just be a little bit tougher for this sign this year. For Sagittarius has Saturn in the third house. Um, Good determination, good uh, driving spirit. Rahu's in the fourth house. This is not a bad placement. It can give high status to a person. Moon and Jupiter are in the sixth house, so it indicates some struggles connected with work. Mars is in the eighth house. Again, this need to tamp down aggression. This need to roll back uh, your more destructive, aggressive tendencies with this particular placement. And Sun and Mercury are placed in the 11th and the 12th house. So I think overall, or excuse me, Venus is located in the 12th house. Sun and Mercury are located in the 11th house, excuse me. And that'll bring financial gains, maybe through government, but also obligations because of romantic or artistic interests. So that's for Sagittarius. So brave, unsettled emotionally, working hard, a little bit blocked, but finally achieving its goals towards the end of the month. For you know, for Capricorn, Capricorn has Venus in the 11th house, which is the best possible planet for Capricorn. The Saturn Venus aspect actually produces a is a wealth producing combination for this planet. The only fly in the ointment, to speak metaphorically, is the Lord Mars Capricorn's um, exalted planet Mars is debilitated in the seventh house. So there'll be a lot of interest in making things go and making things work and making things improve. But I think the problem you run into is that Mars in the eighth house makes it a little bit difficult to do that. Um, and there will be some anxiety or worry about investments that shows up. Saturn in the second house, slow but steady gain, and financially, and Rahu in the third, and Moon and Jupiter in the fourth, in the fifth, excuse me. Overall, good for speculation, good for political office, but not willing to take a chance. So it isn't a bad chart. If we look at K2 in the ninth house, I'm sorry, in the 10th house, it does give that same block of people's attentions will be blocked from that sign. They won't be that strongly recognized. And Sun and Mercury in the 11th, good for gains. Venus in the 12th, good for savings. I'm sorry, I went back to Sagittarius, my apologies. So for Capricorn, Venus is in the 11th, good for gains. Sun and Mercury, Sun and Mercury is in the 11th, Sun and Mercury is in the 10th house, good for work. And Venus is in the 11th house, good for gains. My apologies, folks. For Aquarius, Saturn's in the first house. It's sort of a regal position for Saturn. Leaders have Saturn in the 10th house usually. Um, and especially leaders that impress people, impress the masses. And Rahu is in the second house, so there's a lack of patience with progress being made financially. Moon and Jupiter are in the fourth house. That's actually good for happiness at home. And Mars is in the sixth house. Not a bad placement overall, especially since you have to work out some anger issues this month. But again, try to keep it under control because this sign can be kind of difficult. Let's see, and the last part of it, yeah, so we have a few uh, good combinations for work life for this chart. Um, Set Mars is in the sixth, Sun and Mercury are in the ninth, and Venus is in the 10th. So it should be fairly smooth going for you at career. For Pisces, last but not least, Rahu's in the first house, so it'll cause some emotional confusion for the sign. That'll be made worse by Mars being in the fifth house, so there's this tendency to fall in and out of love with people rather quickly. And basically, you have Moon Jupiter combination in the third house. Typically not considered good except for siblings and brothers and sisters. Um, and let me just, for, let me think now. For um, Pisces, yeah, it looks like there's a lot of focus on uh, bad relationships or relationships in which the partner seems to be disrespectful. Confidence level is low, um, but intelligence is high. Venus is in the ninth house, giving good blessings to the sign in terms of financial growth. And Saturn is in the 12th house, so that usually means there'll be expenses for the sign. So again, not a lot of shift from earlier weeks. Um, a lot of emphasis on expenses. Uh, we've had a major strike over the past month, which was resolved successfully. Now it looks like there's going to be another strike, or it's already started, and so we'll see how we're doing with that. For the actual birth chart, one second. So let's go on to the actual time-space change chart. Sorry, I lost contact for a second there. As I told you, I'm not had high energy level today. I apologize for that. Um, okay, so we have a Sun and Mercury conjunction happening over Alaska and also a Mars conjunction. So there may be some, I hesitate to say fighting, but some disputes over land and some disputes over property still going on in Hawaii. And even in Alaska, some disputes over oil, it looks like. There's a Mercury line running through Western Canada. It's really not touching anything. Um, Mercury as a planet really um, doesn't change very much, but it will increase communication with that part of the world. We have Saturn, Venus, and Moon running through Southern California, Nevada, up through Wyoming and Montana, and also as far east as North and South Dakota. And I think overall I end up going up through That's a Venus line running up through um, North and South Dakota, and also they benefit. So I think when I see this line, one of the things that catches my attention is that we have a Rahu line going up right through the middle of all these lines. And now I give scandal connected with women, scandal connected with local government, and scandal connected with the arts in Texas, Mexico, and all the way up into central Canada. Um, Also, some scandal connected with financial operations in these areas as well. And that scandal line hits and affects everything it comes into contact with. It can't help but not. The There's a moon line running through Texas. Moon and Rahu don't like each other, so I think one of the things we're going to see is kind of an accident-prone area up around Oklahoma and and central Texas, right around here, and also a scandal-prone area. As we go to the east a little bit, the moon line settles over the western part of the Great Lakes and um, up into eastern Canada, and we also have a sun line running through um, Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and also. So let's go on. Let's shrink this down a little bit. There's a Mars line close to New England, and this is so this can indicate some government violence between Florida and Maine. Also, some governmental violence connected with and communication violence connected in that area as well. And we have the Mars line intersects down here, and it's it'll affect Honduras probably primarily, but I think you'll see the real issues with um, government suppression and government overreach, as I like to call it, happening more in Puerto Rico and more in Panama and also in Chile and Peru. Okay, so I think that's, no, I'm not quite done yet. Sorry about that, folks. So we have a Venus line running through Brazil, bad for rainfall. There's a Mercury line running through both Venezuela and Bolivia and touching Argentina and Chile and down to Tierra del Fuego. And there is increased activity aimed at the Falkland Islands. Interestingly enough, I heard that this past weekend. I went, my God, this is really history repeating itself. But this Venus line over Brazil will give more rainforest or more rain threats. And we have a moon line close to the edge of Brazil that'll give more political scandals. A Saturn line intersects it over here. And there'll be a bunch of government scandals in Iceland and that's Mauritania and Western Africa, and also down through touching into England, Spain, Ireland, France, and Portugal. And even worse, I would say some political violence in Norway, Denmark, Germany, Italy, and down into the border between Algeria and Libya. And finally, we have a lot of these more aggressive governmental lines going through Central Africa and also going through going down to again, going down into um, Western Africa, below um, below Gabon, and also we have a Mercury line, so we'll be hearing more about it than we usually do. Uh, the funny thing of it is these wars are all going on, and they're big wars, they're not inconsequential, but we're only hearing about Ukraine and Israel. And I think that's a big problem with our press. It always has been. But it's worsened over the past 20, 30 years, I think. Um, Also some more like tendencies in Turkey, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and down to and even touching New Zealand a little bit. Little New Zealand who accuses, who doesn't bother anybody. There's a Venus line running through Germany and going down to Turkey and also going down through Egypt and down the coast here. And I think that Venus line represents some economic hardships to those countries. The moon line is not bad. The moon is exalted, so it'll give some public recognition to these places. And but the difficult times are indicated for the area around Istanbul and Turkey and the West Coast. Let's see now. We also have a Jupiter line. So we have this Mars line through Saudi Arabia, Turkey, uh, Bulgaria, all the way up into Sweden and Norway. The other thing we have is a Jupiter line running through um, this part of the world down through Saudi Arabia. So there'll be inflationary pressures coming from that part of the world. And we get a little bit of a breather because we have a Saturn line over here, which can indicate that Iran will become more dictatorial or aggressively um, dictatorial and more and much more interested in tradition. There's a Rahu line running through India, so we can expect to see some government scandals coming out of India. And there has been some activity in the war that I mentioned. I believe I mentioned it last week regarding troops landing in Bhutan without being invited. So I think that that basically this part of the world looks a little bit hurting. So Iran, um, Russia, Ukraine, not a surprise, but India will be caught in some kind of a governmental scandal over the next few weeks, and even some violence breaking out over here. So that would be consistent with Bhutan being invaded by the Chinese. Um, there's also a sun line, so some of these governments will be a little bit unstable. This is Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, or Khmer, and let's see, And this Mercury line will receive more communications from China, more involvement with China and Indonesia, from the way this line is being depicted. And finally, to wrap it up, we have a Mercury, Venus, uh, moon line going through China, close to North Korea, and through Japan. So those three areas, and also encompassing Indonesia and Australia. And those three countries will definitely see some striking, some anti-government activity, and also some trials of government officials over the next few months. New Zealand only has one line going through it. Australia has quite a few lines going through it. Australia, I know, is having some financial issues lately. It's very expensive to live down there, extraordinarily expensive. And that's become an issue. And there's a Saturn line running through off the East Coast, uh, accompanied by a moon line. So people from that part of the world will continue to become famous. That's one signification of that. But also, it looks like it's getting tougher and tougher to live out there. Um, okay, so just to wrap up, I was just meditating for a couple of seconds. Just to wrap up, we have a kind of a disrupted week. I don't think any real resolutions of any issues. And I think even more panic in the South Seas because of this Rahu line down here. So this will be interesting to watch. Saturn's affecting uh, New Guinea. Um, so this will be really, really interesting to see what's happening to the economies around these areas. Um, and again, it's important to remember that a lot of world economies, which I think Norway has been a notable exception, have been struggling lately. So, so this isn't a really big surprise. I don't want to emphasize that too much because um, I- I'm not at all that pessimistic that they can't figure it out. But a lot of countries, especially in Europe, have drained their resources due to COVID. A lot of countries around the world have drained their resources due to COVID because they were trying to match what was going on, or at least, or in some cases, do more than what was going on in the United States. But their budgets weren't as big. And also, um, not to sound, I'm not necessarily anti-immigration, but a lot of the countries, especially a lot of liberal democracies, have been putting money into uh, caring for immigrant populations and taxing socialized systems um, very aggressively. So something has to give at some particular point in time. And it doesn't necessarily mean a violent uh, overthrow of the government, but certainly um, the ascent of right-wing parties in Europe, um, especially in Germany, where they weren't necessarily banned, but um, they were looked at with suspicion for many, many years. Actually, one a couple of counties in Germany or a couple of districts in Germany. So this is fascinating. And they came close to winning in France. So, we'll see what happens. All right. So I'm going to let you go. My apologies for my rather sleepy behavior today. That's not really no excuses, but I apologize for that. And I hope to see you next week. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching uh, and for enjoying and commenting. I've gotten a lot more comments lately. We're getting close to 1,000, so that's a pivotal 1,000 subscribers. So that's a significant goal in YouTube. So if I qualify, I could get this particular show monetized. That's not my only reason for doing this, obviously, but it would be a help. And then I could spend more time on this. Okay? All right. Thanks a lot, folks. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Take care of yourselves. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching, and namaste.